This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 369 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Wutzke, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's 2-2 draw against Cologne, how Saturday's match against Eintracht Frankfurt could be the last chance Saloon for the Champions League qualification, and we will discuss everything else that happened in between the international break. As for Tuesday's match against Manchester City, we will have an extra preview episode for that. So stay tuned. Anyway, for all that and more, joins me Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing? How have you enjoyed the time off from club football, if that's something you do?
Hi Stefan, it's been a while. I've enjoyed it by not watching a single second of either of the three Germany World Cup qualifiers or indeed any other international football, including under 21 Euros. So it's been basically a football-free zone outside of work, obviously, for me. And that's been a nice change of pace. I think there's definitely been too much football going on since the Bundesliga restart in May last year. And I'm kind of looking forward to an extended break in the summer already.
Yeah, same. I'll be honest. I feel a little fatigued. Maybe it's due to the ongoing pandemic that I don't know. It's just not the same with the empty stadiums, and it's not like Borussia Dortmund are making things super interesting right now. The 2-2 draw against Cologne, I was very annoyed by it. I think you kind of saw it coming, if I remember your timeline, that you said that the collapse or whatever was not a big surprise. Why not?
Because this is Borussia Dortmund and this is what keeps happening to them. And until they prove over a prolonged period of time that this thing doesn't happen anymore, I think you need to expect it all the time, or at least in a fairly regular rhythm, if you like. And I mean, Cologne was the right opponent to trip them up again. I think all that we know about this team, how they tend to get complacent within games, playing against a side that had one point in their last 4 games before meeting Dortmund. That was kind of the right situation for Dortmund to trip up over themselves. And I mean, that was basically perfectly encapsulated within the game. I mean, they started really well. Dortmund had, I think, strong 10, 15 or so minutes. And then for whatever or no reason at all, I mean, who's to say really at this point, they just kind of stopped playing football, allowed Cologne into the game. And even a side as lackluster and lacking in firepower as Cologne, if you invite them over and over, at some point they will come knocking. And I mean, when you scramble for a late draw against a team that, should possibly be relegated at the end of the season, that's not a good sign. And when Markus Gisdol, who's not a particularly good head coach, saves his job twice against Dortmund in one season, that's also not a good sign. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is also part of what we talked about in the opener with, fatigue and everything kind of seeping in together. I mean, it's been a while since the game, but I could honestly not tell you any specifics about like how the goals came about. I don't even remember, the exact order of goals. I only remember the Haaland equalizer at the death, more or less. And I honestly think the less said about this repeating occurrence of Dortmund shitting the bed against bad teams, the better.
Yeah, so real quick, I think it was Erling Haaland who scored the first goal after 3 minutes, which was just almost a lazy long ball by Emre Can, and then as you said, Dortmund's tension dropped, and I think it was Andre Duda who then equalized via penalty because Jude Bellingham, touched the ball with his arm in the box or his shoulder or something, but after VAR review. Then at halftime, Julian Brandt was subbed off because he was the worst of the bunch, according to Erdin Terzic, and I think, Moukoko came on, who's now obviously injured, thanks to the international break. Khanier replaced Urena at some point, and I think Ansgar Knauf came on after 81 minutes for Meunier, but not before Meunier assisted Ismail Jakobs, which was a pass he absolutely should have cut out, but Jakobs then smashed it home past Marvin Hitz in like the 65th minute, and then Dortmund had plenty of time to fix this, but couldn't really do it, and Erling Haaland then of the, first Ansgar Knauf assist, with the sort of tap-in deflection goal. I'm not sure whether it was an own goal really or not, but it counted for Haaland. And in between, I think Haaland had a couple of chances to score a couple more goals, but didn't. And then I think the big controversy was that he just sort of threw his jersey at the feet of Meret and then just stormed off into the locker room. And I think that sort of sums up how the taste in my mouth has been the entire time since the international break, that it's going to be very, very hard for this Dortmund team to qualify for the Champions League because, games like this happen. And if you have someone like Haaland who really wants to win all the time, and then sees the rest of this team pull out this sort of garbage performance, I think, he was super annoyed. I don't know, Lars, if you want to say that Haaland didn't play much better either. It's just annoying because it just adds more dysfunction to something that seemed like it was finally going again, but then did not.
Honestly, I don't know if I agree with that. First of all, when you retold the game, I kind of thought I wouldn't have been surprised if that happened in February. It's been completely wiped off my hard drive, if you like. But I think with that Haaland situation at the end of the game, I think that can also be a positive for the team when they see how much a guy cares. Obviously, these are all professionals, and I think we do them a disservice if we act like they only play for money and don't play for success with the team. I mean, these are highly motivated, even if you don't see it all the time with this collection of players, but they are all highly motivated athletes, and I pretty much give everyone the benefit of the doubt in that regard. So I don't think anybody wants it too little, which is an often used excuse. So, but still, I think when they see arguably their biggest star performer or whatever you want to anoint Haaland as being, I think it's not a bad thing necessarily to see how much someone like that cares and how irritated they get when Dortmund drop 2 points rather needlessly against a relegation candidate. Obviously, if this happens all the time and your striker gets annoyed during the game, which Haaland tends to be at some points, but I mean, that's still something most strikers do, but it can get overboard, obviously. And I think we might be talking about the Haaland traveling circus a little later on, perhaps. I don't know. Sure. I think at some point the distractions might become a bit too much with all that Haaland entails, but I think as long as that guy pours his heart out on the pitch, and I think there's no doubt that he does that week in, week out, and the scores, the goals he scores speak for themselves, really. As long as he does that, I think he's entitled to throwing a bit of a fit at the end of a game, and I think most of his teammates will appreciate the place he's coming from there.
Yeah. I certainly kind of felt like my weekend was a little ruined. I don't know why, but it really annoyed me more than it probably should have. And that's that. I mean, final thought is maybe that I think you could see that Dortmund were missing Marco Reus a little bit in this game, who was obviously still out with the injury courtesy of Vladimir Darida. But let's move on. Dortmund are still in contention for the Champions League. In the meantime, though, before we talk about Frankfurt, we had an extension of Hans-Joachim Watzke, Thomas Drees, and Carsten Kramer. During this international break, they will all now stay on until December 2025 instead of December 2022.
No. Only Watzke till December, Drees and CC Cash, as he likes to be called, or is called anyway, until the end of June. I don't really know. I think it's probably down to continuity and always having someone in charge left or whatever.
Yeah, so Drees will continue to be responsible for finance, organization, and legal and investor relations. And Carsten Kramer is the head, or whatever you want to call it, of sales, marketing, and digitalization. So, there you go. What do you make of these three key figures at the helm of Borussia Dortmund extending their contracts? Meanwhile, I think Michael Zorc said today at the news conference that he will definitely not prolong his stint, because he says that was sort of a long-term decision that he made.
First of all, it's no surprise whatsoever. I think Watzke basically telegraphed this kind of move in January in an interview, I think, with Ruhrnachrichten. I mean, the only really relevant, or not to say relevant, but the only thing that most people will actually have an experience with is Watzke staying on. And I think that was also the only position that presumably would have changed hands without the pandemic. I think they definitely would have held on to Kramer, who's only been in his role high up the hierarchy since, I think, 2018. So he's relatively new in that regard. And Drees, as the head of finance and all things money related, he wasn't going anywhere. So Watzke initially wanted to leave his post, I think, in 22, at the end of 22. Obviously now pandemic and continuity is even more important than ever. And also I think there's just not really a viable replacement option available to them. I think a lot of people around the club and some media members have speculated that Kramer is going to be head of the, I don't even know what the English equivalent would be, head of the board or whatever. But I think Kramer doesn't really have much of a standing outside of Dortmund's internal structure, so I don't necessarily see him being a viable replacement for Watzke, at least early on. I think if you give him more responsibilities and more of a profile outside of, those in the know, maybe that could change. But overall, I mean, it's a no-brainer decision as long as Watzke wants to do it. He's, whatever people say who probably aren't the most intelligent when they say that Watzke only works for Dortmund's bank account or whatever, or that he's dumb with transfers or whatever. I mean, I think we shouldn't pay too much attention to those people. I think Watzke is very good at his job. It's very difficult to find someone to not only do what he does, but potentially do it better at some point. So as long as he wants to stay on and still motivated, there's no reason to not keep working with him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how he will marshal the ship during the clusterfuck that I assume will be Dortmund's switch of sporting directors, which I think Sebastian Kehl will take the helm. And yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how that goes.
Yeah, but I don't see Kehl doing that alone. I think they are either going to promote Markus Pilawa to a more prominent role, who is the head of the scouting department, or I don't think it's a coincidence. And I think Thomas Hitzelsberger, the CEO of Stuttgart, has basically admitted to it that Sven Mislintat, who's obviously been a very prominent figure in Dortmund before and is now a sporting director at Stuttgart, he basically has a clause in his contract that allows him to leave for Dortmund at some point. And I mean, there are enough whispers around Dortmund that is definitely an option they're looking at. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kehl was sporting director, but they actually went a bit outside of the box and added a board member in sporting terms. I still don't know the equivalent in English.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be really interesting. I think that in the long term, it's very likely that Sven Mislintat will have that position one way or another, depending on how much success or not success Dortmund will have. But I think they will always have a keen eye on the quote-unquote diamond eye. So, I think that's sort of destined, but that kind of depends on how much of a powerful position Dortmund will afford Mislintat, because I think he doesn't want to play second fiddle at this point. So, interesting to keep an eye on, but for now, things will continue the way they are. So, with that, obviously, we can move over to the game against Frankfurt. And before anything else, I'll just quickly go through the personnel, because Marco Reus, who missed against Cologne, as I previously said, will or should be an option. So is Rafael Guerreiro, who had to travel to the Portuguese national team, only for them to confirm that he is, in fact, injured. But both have been in team training, and Edin Terzic today said that it's looking good for them. Also in team training, albeit without any contact yet, is Matteo Morey, who also may be included in the matchday squad, but I assume he will not be a starter. Looks sadly a little bit more bleak when it comes to Jadon Sancho, who will miss for at least another week. I think Terzic said that he wants to, or is hoping for, positive development in the next 7 to 10 days, whatever that means. Sadly, Youssoufa Moukoko, as I previously mentioned, returned from the international break from the under-21. I don't know if he even played a minute. I don't think he did. He returned injured, and some reports have suggested that it could be more of a long-term thing as well. And obviously, Dan-Axel Zagadou, he had to undergo knee surgery and will be out for the rest of the season. Last, the Zagadou injury is obviously a big blow, considering that Dortmund have 2.5 center backs with Hummels and Akanji, and I think you can obviously add Emre Can by now. I don't think this was planned this way to go into the season like that. Obviously, Zagadou, hasn't really played too many minutes this season. I think he's only played 2 full games over 90 minutes, and I think one of those was the cup game against Braunschweig, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you make of this malaise and the future of Zagadou at Borussia Dortmund?
Well, to be honest, you kind of made the argument that it isn't in fact a big deal because he hasn't been available and they've been reasonably fine in terms of personnel, not necessarily performance. But I mean, it's almost a situation where everything you get from him is kind of has to be considered a bonus until he shows over an extended period of time that he can be available for longer. I think we all know how talented he is, and I think whenever he has played, multiple games in a row, you didn't really get the sense that he's any worse than the other options, including even Hummels. Obviously, he's a very important leader and also kind of a figure for what this club stands for, Hummels is. But with Zagadou, he and Akanji both have contracts that are running out in 22. So this is a very important time of the year for those guys, including also Thomas Delaney and Axel Witsel. All 4 of them have contracts for only next season. And my guess would be that at least 2 of these guys will be gone. I think Delaney is the most likely to get an extension. I think Akanji is the most likely to be sold because he has a fairly solid market, it seems, especially in the Premier League, where he also has basically publicly stated he wants to play eventually. I don't know necessarily that, Manchester United are looking at him based on performances, and also availability has been a bit of a concern for him as well. But I think there's definitely going to be interest from maybe more of a mid-table side that Dortmund might also be interested in cashing in. I think they've been fairly happy with Akanji's performances, and there are reports that they want to extend his contract, but I think this might come down to a numbers game, especially if they miss out on the Champions League. We all know or I've read the reports that they want to sign Maxence Lacroix of Wolfsburg, who's really good, but also quite expensive at a reported fee of like 30 million, which I'm not sure they can afford, even if they are selling Akanji in the summer. So with Zagadou, I think it basically comes down to his probably not having a strong market in the summer and them not wanting to go into the season without a contract extension. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was more of a short-term extension, kind of reevaluating the situation in the summer of 22 without running the risk of losing him without a transfer fee. And I think Witsel is probably likely to leave on a free transfer in 22 because he's on very high wages, relatively old, so I don't necessarily think that he's going to have a market where he's going to get the salary demands met, and Dortmund are not going to get too high of a transfer fee for a player such as Witsel these days.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would appreciate Lacroix, to be honest. Speaking of center backs, obviously Frankfurt's notable absentees, I think, are both center backs in Makoto Hasebe, who is sitting out his suspension or is sitting out his fifth booking basically, and Hinteregger, who is injured. Both usually key players for them, but otherwise Frankfurt have pretty much all players on deck. Obviously Andre Silva most prominently, because he right now has as many goals as Erling Haaland. He's playing a terrific season for them. So is Eintracht Frankfurt in general. I think they're quite, I don't know if they're overperforming or just performing well while others are not. But right now they are fourth in the Bundesliga on 47 points. Dortmund are 4 points behind them with 43. And I'm really intrigued what we'll see from the Eagles as they make the trip to Dortmund. Obviously, the first fixture between both sides, I think, ended 1-1. And if I remember correctly, ESPN Plus was down for the entire first half. So, Lars, this is going to be a big one for Dortmund. Not as big as the Topspiel, which is between Bayern and Leipzig, but nevertheless, if Dortmund loses one, they will be 7 points away from the Champions League spots, and B, they will be level on points with Bayer Leverkusen, who are playing against Schalke this weekend. So I think even Leverkusen will beat the Royal Blues currently, even though they were really butchered by Hertha BSC. So what do you make of this team, Frankfurt? I hope you've watched them more than other teams, because I think in terms of Bundesliga, the fun rating, I think Frankfurt scores a little higher than most teams.
They do. Doesn't mean I watch them a lot, because it's I said too much football, and that also applies to Frankfurt. I mean, I do remember a little bit from the first meeting. Good thing ESPN came back on for the second half, because they showed Gio Reyna's last good moment in a Dortmund shirt, which was an absolute belter of a goal against Frankfurt to score the equalizer. I think Daichi Kamada, who's a really good player for Frankfurt, part of their double 10 alignment, if you like. So they often, not always, but often play with him and Amin Younes behind Silva, instead of opting for a two-striker approach with Lukajovic, who came back in January from Real Madrid. I mean, Frankfurt, you said, are they overperforming or are other teams underperforming? I think they've lost 3 games this season. Dortmund have lost 9. Frankfurt have only been beaten by Bayern in the first leg, which was I think a 5-0 shellacking in Munich. But obviously they turned around and beat Bayern at home a few weeks ago.
Wasn't it also a shellacking? I can't remember.
I seem to remember it was fairly close in the second half, but that was actually a game I did watch a few minutes of, to be fair. They've also been beaten by Wolfsburg, I think, still in the first half of the season, and then recently they had a clanker against Werder Bremen. which is kind of a special fixture. I think there's a lot of bad blood between especially like the bench areas there. I think Kofeld and Adi Hütter, the coaches of Bremen and Frankfurt respectively, don't get along at all, and that kind of permeates to the subs bench and sporting directors and whatever. So kind of a write-off for Frankfurt in a sense. But I mean, a team that's gone 26 games with 3 defeats, that is definitely to be taken serious. They've basically have the same goal scoring record as Dortmund. I think they've scored 1 less, but also have conceded 1 less. So I think these are 2 fairly evenly matched teams on paper, even though Dortmund arguably have the edge in individual quality, even though they are without Jadon Sancho, as you mentioned. But Frankfurt are definitely the better collective in some ways. I think they have,
in many ways,
for fairly obvious reasons, a coaching advantage in having Hütter, who's one of the more experienced in his post in the Bundesliga at this point. A coach I rate fairly highly. I think, last year in February or so, Westdeutsche Zeitung in Dortmund local paper said that Hütter was on a short list of candidates who could take over for Favre. And I will tell you, I would not be mad at that. I mean, obviously now they have signed Marco Rose, but Hütter would have been a nice candidate, in my opinion. He plays a lot of interesting stuff. As I said, they have a fairly flexible attacking style. He always churns out strikers. I mean, they had the herd of buffaloes, as they styled themselves, with Sebastian Aller, Jovic and Ante Rebic. They lost them, and now André Silva turns in a 21-plus goal season, and Kamada and Armin Younes is back in the national team, and Filip Kostic is still doing his thing on the left wing. Even Erik Dorm, who some of our listeners will remember from mostly being injured at Dortmund in the latter stages of his Dortmund career, he's having a good season. So there's a lot to like about Frankfurt that extends also beyond the pitch. They do a lot of good work in the community. They have been very outspoken against racism and right-wing terrorism in Germany. I think that's probably something that even our American listeners will have read about, because that was kind of a big deal, really. They take stands in important issues, and generally, I think, honestly, that Frankfurt are probably the most liked club in Germany from a neutral's perspective. So it would almost be a shame if Dortmund were to deny them their first ever entry into the Champions League. But, I mean, needs must, and Dortmund definitely need to win this game.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they will. Obviously, also in that team, you haven't mentioned him yet, is Sebastian Rode. Next to So in that midfield, usually double pivot. Very physical team, I would say. And as you also mentioned, Kostic, I think roughly 50 or 60% or so of their attacks all go over Frankfurt's left side. And
good.
Yeah. So we'll have
no
Meunier.
problem at all.
I'm sure Meunier will handle it just fine, just as he always does. So,
you know why they call him the postman? Because he always delivers.
Yes, exactly. And that, and also because he's playing in yellow, like most postmen in Germany,
and also because he literally was a postman.
All right. Anyway,
he worked as a mailman. That's a well-known fact about Thomas Meunier.
Is that so?
Yeah, and like all good jokes, we've now explained it to death.
Yes. Anyway, so Tuta, Ilsanka, and Ndika will probably form the back three for Frankfurt. And Kevin Trapp, who is having, I think, arguably pretty good season, will be in goals. So that's going to be pretty much their lineup. I think we can expect, Chandler and Jovic and, I don't know, maybe Barkok or so to come on during the game for Dortmund. Meanwhile, I assume that Marvin Hitz will remain in goal. I don't know what else there could be. Do you think
Burki.
that... Yeah, obviously, but Oh man, just end it now. But no, yeah. Do you think that Akanji will revert back into the lineup for Emre Can, who I think played for 90 minutes for Germany 3 times in a row during this international break?
Yes, I assume that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if Can played in midfield instead. This is kind of a hidden big game for Can, who was born in Frankfurt, played for Frankfurt youth team, has a lot of connections still to the Frankfurt area. And also, I think they kind of missed having him in midfield. Obviously, they have Delaney, who's also played quite a bit for Denmark, whereas Mo Dahoud and Julian Brandt were left at home by Joachim Löw, so they should be well rested. Julian Brandt always looks well rested, even during the games. I don't know what's up with that. But I wouldn't be surprised if Can played in midfield, but definitely expect Hummels next to Akanji. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely expect Bellingham to play. So I don't know if there's space for Can or not, but yeah, obviously he has these Frankfurt roots. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward with Reus and Hazard and Haaland up front. Obviously, Moukoko is injured. I don't know what happens with Tigges, whether he will get a couple minutes. Otherwise, I'm hoping that Rafael Guerreiro is back, because that would obviously be a big boost. If not, we'll have Nico Schulz, I assume.
Happy birthday, Nico.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, it's literally his birthday today.
Cool. So April Fool's is his birthday, is what you're saying? He's a... No. Anyway.
I'm not making the connection, I'm just spitting facts.
Do you think the aftermath of the Cologne match still sort of lingers on in that Dortmund team, and we will see the quote-unquote proverbial reaction, or do you think that it doesn't matter and we'll have more to worry about potential international break fatigue, etc.?
I mean, a lot of the players had pretty decent, I would say, international breaks, so I don't necessarily think that will hinder him. I think, for example, Hazard and even Meunier had good games with Belgium. Bellingham was kind of the talk of the England team, even without getting too many minutes. Can, before the loss to North Macedonia, did surprisingly well at left back, apparently. So the thing is, do we think this Dortmund side is capable of, turning their anger into motivation, or do they even feel too much anger after the Cologne match, or do they kind of shrug it off as, oh, that was one of those games, I guess. We have them all the time. So, I mean, whenever we've talked about them showing reactions, were those actually reactions, or did they just revert to playing to their standards or to the capabilities that this team has? So I'm struggling to kind of put a name on it, but I don't necessarily think that a game 2 weeks ago has much of a bearing on a game that I think they will have spent 2 weeks talking up in the dressing room. I mean, in the opener, you said this was basically last chance Saloon, and it obviously is, because if they are 7 points behind a team with 7 match days to go that has 3 losses, and you have 10 at that point, I mean, there's literally nothing to suggest that you can wheel them back in. So you're kind of looking at avoiding playing in the Conference League next season, which I'm sure not a single Dortmund player has any clue about what that actually is. So I think the motivation comes from what's at stake here and not what happened last time.
Yeah, fair enough. But that also should have been motivation against Cologne, but was not. So anyway, Frankfurt, after playing against Dortmund, they will face Wolfsburg, Gladbach, then Augsburg, Leverkusen, Mainz, Schalke, and Freiburg. So it's not the easiest of all run-ins, but I think Dortmund's isn't much easier either. I think Dortmund still play Leipzig and Wolfsburg and Leverkusen and such. So going to be interesting between those teams. I must say, from a neutral perspective, I'm kind of more rooting for Frankfurt in this competition. But if I could pick and choose, Wolfsburg just completely collapse and fall down the table. But I don't think there's much indication for that to become true. So with that being said, I don't know. I almost don't really care if Dortmund play in the Champions League next season or not. I think if it's Europa League, it's fine too. I feel in the more general sense, maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like this Dortmund team may not be able to sustain long-term Champions League football anyway, with the resurgence of Leipzig or surgence and other teams maybe getting stronger over time. I don't know. I just feel like we're a little bit on the slope down, and if you look at certain player transfers Dortmund made in the past, and the salaries they're paying players like Meunier or Nico Schulz, I don't see players like that leaving anytime soon, and I don't think Dortmund can really replace Haaland and Sancho so well that they will keep that level. So maybe I'm completely wrong about that, but I feel like we're a little bit in decline now after a lot of great years. But hey, it still could be a cup winning season, etc. So with that all being said, and maybe I'm just a tad too negative here, Lars, why don't you predict the scoreline for this match?
Yeah, Stefan, when you are too negative, we turn to me. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, sometimes you act then as the equalizer.
Yeah, and someone perhaps might be scoring an equalizer when Dortmund beat Frankfurt 2-1 on Saturday.
Well, that's a fascinating prediction, because it was mine as well. I feel like for many years this was sort of the go-to scoreline that Dortmund had in home matches against Frankfurt. So yeah, I think 2-1 sounds about right. It's going to be really tricky for Dortmund, especially with the Champions League tie ahead. So I'm looking forward to previewing the sort of bonus games Dortmund have now in the quarterfinal against Manchester City. I don't really see them prevailing there either, but you never know in football. This is why we all watch, etc., etc. Anyway, Lars, thanks for coming on and doing this quick preview of the Frankfurt game and sort of very late digestion of the Cologne match. Any closing thoughts?
I would encourage people not to get too wound up with the traveling circus of Mino Raiola and Ulf Inge Haaland. They were in Barcelona and Madrid on Thursday. I kind of assuming they are going to make a visit to the greater Manchester area, might include a stop at Liverpool. I wouldn't be surprised to see them.
Like Street Fighter 2 with the little airplane traveling everywhere.
Yeah, I don't get that reference, but they might still turn up in Paris or Turin or I don't know. As long as they stay out of Munich airspace and everybody is in agreement that Haaland is not going to leave before 22, unless someone offers them an absurd amount of money that you can't refuse in pandemic times. I think people can kind of appreciate the entertainment value of having a Raiola player at your disposal. And I think if there's a player who's not going to suffer in terms of performance from all this talk about him, it's probably Erling Haaland. So I'm, as I said, kind of encouraging people to relax in that regard and not to get too wound up with the sideshow.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I have nothing to add. So with that, I'll just wrap it up. You can follow Lars at Lars Pollmann on Twitter. You can follow myself at Stefan Butzko on Twitter. You can follow all of us at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook. If you want to subscribe to this show in its various means and forms, go to YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, etc. And if you want to read our written content, go to theyellowwall.net. as always, thank you very much to our patrons for your continuing support. With that, as always, thank you for listening and goodbye.